but there's something that tells me I'm being foxed, that it isn't a complete puzzle at all, just an illusion, yet somehow I can't even tell for sure where pieces are missing." The girl leaned over the table, her gray eyes deep with concern. "Tom," she said, almost in a whisper, "suppose there is something, Tom, something big. What's it going to do to you, Tom? You can't fight anything as powerful as PIB, and these men that hated Dad could break you." Tom grinned tiredly, his eyes far away. "I know," he said softly, "but a man can only swallow so much. Somewhere, I guess, I've still got a conscience. It's a nuisance, but it's still there." He looked closely at the lovely girl across from him. "Maybe it's just that I'm tired of being sick of myself. I'd like myself for a change. I haven't liked myself for years." He looked straight at her, his voice very small in the still booth. "I'd like some other people to like me too. So I've got to keep going." Her hand was in his then, grasping his fingers tightly, and her voice was trembling. "I didn't think there was anybody left like that," she said. "Tom, you aren't by yourself, remember that. No matter what happens, I'm with you all the way. I'm afraid, but I'm with you." He looked up at her then, and his voice was tight. "Listen, Ann, your father planned to go to Berlin before he died. What was he going to do if he went to the Berlin Conference?" She shrugged helplessly. "The usual diplomatic folderol, I suppose. He always no, that's not right. He wanted to go so badly that he died when he wasn't allowed to, Ann. He must have had something in mind, something concrete, something tremendous, something that would have changed the picture a great deal." And then she was staring at Shander, her face white, gray eyes wide. "Of course he had something!" she exclaimed. "He must have. Oh, I don't know what. He wouldn't say what was in his mind. But when he came home after that meeting with the president he was furious. I've never seen him so furious, Tom. He was almost out of his mind with anger, and he paced the floor, and swore and nearly tore the room apart. He wouldn't speak to anyone, just stamped around and threw things. And then we heard him cry out, and when we got to him he was unconscious on the floor, and he was dead when the doctor came." She set her glass down with trembling fingers. "He had something big, Tom. I'm sure of it. He had some information that he planned to drop on the conference table with such a bang it would stop the whole world cold. He knew something that the conference doesn't know." Tom Chandler stood up, trembling, and took the briefcase. "It should be here," he said, "if not the whole story, at least the missing pieces." He started for the booth door. "Go home," he said. "I'm going where I can examine these files without any interference. Then I'll call you." And then he was out the door, shouldering his way through the crowded restaurant, frantically weaving his way to the street. He didn't hear Ann's voice as she called him to stop, didn't see her stop at the booth door, watch a confusion of fear and tenderness, and collapse into the booth, sobbing as if her heart would break. Because a crazy, twisted, impossible idea was in his mind, an idea that had plagued him since he had started reading that morning. An idea with an answer, an acid test, folded in the briefcase under his arm. He bumped into a fat man at the bar, grunted angrily, and finally reached the street, whistled at the cab that lingered nearby. The car swung up before him, the door springing open automatically. He had one foot on the running board before he saw the trap, saw the tight yellowish face and the glittering eyes inside the cab. Suddenly there was an explosion of bright purple brilliance, and he was screaming, twisting and screaming and reeling backward onto the sidewalk, doubled over with agonizing fire that burned through his side and down one leg, forcing scream after scream from his throat as he blindly staggered to the wall of the building, pounded it with his fist for relief from the searing pain. And then he was on his side on the sidewalk, sobbing, blubbering incoherently to the uniformed policeman who was dragging him gently to his feet, seeing through burning eyes the group of curious people gathering round. Suddenly realization dawned through the pain, and he let out a cry of anger and bolted for the curb, knocking the policeman aside, his eyes wild, searching the receding stream of traffic for the cab. A picture of the occupant burned indelibly into his mind, a face he had seen, recognized. The cab was gone, he knew, gone like a breath of wind. The briefcase was also gone. He gave the address of the Essex University Hospital to the cabby, and settled back in the seat, gripping the handguard tightly to fight down the returning pain in his side and leg. His mind was whirling, fighting in a welter of confusion, trying to find some avenue of approach, some way to make sense of the mess. The face in the cab recurred again and again before his eyes, the gaunt, putty-colored cheeks, the sharp glittering eyes. His acquaintance with Frank Mariel had been brief and unpleasant, in the past, but that was a face he would never forget. But how could Mariel have known where he would be, and when? There was precision in that attack, far too smooth precision to have been left to chance, or even to independent planning. His mind skirted the obvious a dozen times, and each time rejected it angrily. Finally he knew he could no longer reject the thought, the only possible answer. Mariel had known where he would be, and at what time. Therefore someone must have told him. He stiffened in the seat, the pain momentarily forgotten. Only one person could have told Mariel. Only one person knew where the file was, and where it would be after he left the restaurant. He felt cold bitterness creep down his spine. She had known, and sat there making eyes at him, and telling him how wonderful he was, how she was with him no matter what happened, and she'd already sold him down the river. He shook his head angrily, trying to keep his thoughts on a rational plane. Why? Why had she strung him along? Why had she even started to help him? And why, above all, turn against her own father? The hospital driveway crunched under the cab, and he hopped out, wincing with every step, and walked into a phone booth off the lobby. He gave a name and in a moment heard the PA system echoing it. Dr. Prex, calling Dr. Prex. In a moment he heard a receiver click off, and a familiar voice said, "Prex speaking." "Prex, this is Shander. Got a minute?" The voice was cordial. "Dozens of them. Where are you?" "I'll be up in your quarters." Shander slammed down the receiver and started for the elevator to the resident physician's wing. He let himself in by a key, and settled down in the darkened room to wait an eternity before a tall, gaunt man walked in, snapped on a light, and loosened the white jacket at his neck. He was a young man, no more than 30, with a tired, sober face and jet black hair falling over his forehead. His eyes lighted as he saw Shandor, and he grinned. "You look like you've been through the mill. What happened?" Shandor stripped off his clothes, exposing the angry red of the seared skin. The tall man whistled softly, the smile fading. Carefully he examined the burned area, his fingers gentle on the tender surface. Then he turned troubled eyes to Shander. "You've been messing around with dirty guys, Tom. Nobody but a real dog would turn a scalder on a man." He went to a cupboard, returned with a jar of salve and bandages. "Is it serious?" Shander's face was deathly white. "I've been fighting shock with thiamine for the last hour, but I don't think I can hold out much longer." Prex shrugged. "You didn't get enough to do any permanent damage, if that's what you mean. Just fried the pain receptors in your skin to a crisp is all. A little dose is so painful you can't do anything but holler for a while, but it won't hurt you permanently unless you get it all over you. Enough can kill you." He dressed the burned areas carefully, then bared Shander's arm and used a pressure syringe for a moment. "Who's using one of those things?" Shander was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Look, Prex, I need some help badly." His eyes looked up in dull anger. "I'm going to see a man tonight, and I want him to talk, hard and fast. I don't care right now if he nearly dies from pain, but I want him to talk. I need somebody along who knows how to make things painful." Prex scowled and then pointed to the burn. "This the man?" "That's the man." Prex put away the salve. "I suppose I'll help you then. Is this official or a grudge?" "A little of both. Look, Prex, I know this is a big favor to ask, but it's on the level. Believe me, it's square, nothing shady about it. The method may not be legal, but the means are justified. I can't tell you what's up, but I am asking you to trust me." Prex grinned. "You say it's all right, it's all right. When?" Chandler glanced at his watch. "About 3 this morning, I think. We can take your car." They talked for a while, and a call took the doctor away. Chandler slept a little, then made some black coffee. Shortly before 3 the two men left the hospital by the physician's entrance, and Prex's little beat-up Dartmouth slid smoothly into the desultory traffic for the suburbs. The apartment was small and neatly furnished. Chandler and the doctor had been admitted by a sleepy doorman who had been jolted to sudden attention by Tom's PIB card, and after 5 minutes pounding on the apartment door, a sleepy-eyed man opened the door a crack. "Say, what's the idea of pounding on a man's door at this time of night? Haven't you—" Chandler gave the door a shove with his shoulder, driving it open into the room. "Shut up," he said bluntly. He turned so the light struck his face. The little man's jaw dropped in astonishment. "Shandor!" he whispered. Frank Muriel looked like a weasel, sallow, sunken-cheeked, with a yellowish cast to his skin that contrasted unpleasantly with the coal-black hair. "That's right," said Chandler. "We've come for a little talk. Meet the doctor." Muriel's eyes shifted momentarily to Prex's stony face, then back to Shandor, ghosts of fear creeping across his face. "What do you want?" "I've come for the files." The little man scowled. "You've come to the wrong man. I don't have any files." Prex carefully took a small black case from his pocket, unsnapped a hinge, and a small shiny instrument fell out in his hand. "The files," said Chandler. "Who has them?" I don't know." Chandler smashed a fist into the man's face, viciously, knocking him reeling to the floor. "You tried to kill me tonight," he snarled. "You should have done it upright. You should stick to magazine editing and keep your nose out of dirty games, Muriel. Who has the files?" Muriel picked himself up, trembling, met Chandler's fist, and sprawled again, a trickle of blood appearing at his mouth. "Harry Dartmouth has the files," he groaned. "They're probably in Chicago now." "What do you know about Harry Dartmouth?" Muriel gained a chair this time before Chandler hit him. "I've only met him a couple of times. He's the president of Dartmouth Bearing Corporation, and he's my boss. Dartmouth Bearing publishes Fighting World. I do what he tells me." Chandler's eyes flared. "Including murder, is that right?" Muriel's eyes were sullen. "Come on, talk. Why did Dartmouth want Ingersoll's personal files?" The man just stared sullenly at the floor. Prex pressed a stud on the side of the shiny instrument, and a purple flash caught Muriel's little finger. Muriel jerked and squealed with pain. "Speak up," said Chandler. "I didn't hear you." "Probably about the bonds," Muriel whimpered. His face was ashen, and he eyed Prex with undistinguished pleading. "Look, tell him to put that thing away." Chandler grinned without humor. "You don't like scalders, eh? Get a big dose, and you're dead. Muriel, but I guess you know that, don't you? Think about it, but don't think too long. What about the bonds?" "Ingersoll has been trying to get Dartmouth Bearing Corporation on legal grounds for years. Something about the government bonds they held, bought during the China Wars. You know, surplus profits. Dartmouth Bearing could beat the taxes by buying bonds. Harry Dartmouth thought Ingersoll's file had some legal dope against him. He was afraid you'd try to make trouble for the company. So he hired this little pixie, eh? Seems to me you've had enough on your hands editing that rag." Muriel shot him an injured look. "Fighting World has the second largest magazine circulation in the country. It's a good magazine." "It's a warmonger propaganda rag," snapped Shandor. He glared at the little man. "What's your relation?"